Hello and welcome to Unstressed. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Now, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am recording this podcast, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Well, today we are going to explore positive intelligence quotient, your PQ. You've heard of IQ, you've heard of EQ, emotional quotient. Well, this is your positive intelligence quotient, or PQ. How much your thoughts are working for you or against you. Your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy, and learning how to move from self-sabotage to self-mastery and fulfill your potential. This is the work of Shazad Shimin, and he is the author of the New York best-selling book, Positive Intelligence. I'd recommend it to you. Shazad has lectured on positive intelligence at Stanford University and has trained faculty at Stanford and Yale business schools. He's been the CEO of one of the largest coaching training organizations in the world. He's a preeminent C-suite advisor, and he's coached hundreds of CEOs and their executive teams. His background is in psychology, a BA in psychology, a master's in electrical engineering, and he has an MBA from Stanford. But my guests today are working with Shazad in the Positive Intelligence organization. Rhonda, Farrell, Lloyd. Now, Rhonda is an accomplished leader and team member at Positive Intelligence, and she's driven by a passion for integrating mental fitness into organizational settings. Rhonda's got a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Master's in Organizational Management, and additional certificates in workplace mental health leadership and change leadership. Rhonda's joined by Debbie Masson, who is a dedicated positive intelligence coach. And Debbie partners with coaches, including me, and many organizations globally to cultivate enduring enhancement in mental fitness, well-being, performance, both personally and professionally. And this so beautifully aligns with our mission at Unstress Health. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Rhonda Farrell Lloyd and Debbie Masson. Welcome to the show, Rhonda and Debbie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here.
It's most unusual for me to be talking to two people, but it's really exciting because this is something that I've been very passionate about since I first got involved in it about 6 months ago. And, you know, the whole story of, I remember my wife saying to me, why are you so excited about positive intelligence? And my aunt, well, give me the elevator pitch because she knows I can rave on. And I said, well, it just gives a language and a structure to the noise that's going on in my head all the time, and positive things can come from it. But I was really interested, before we came on, we were just talking about our own backgrounds, and mine has been in healthcare for 45 years, and I realised mindset and what goes on in my head is a really important part of that journey, and I'm still learning. But Rhonda, you've both had your own journeys. I wonder if maybe, Rhonda, you could start and just share with us a bit of your journey that brought you to the concept of positive intelligence.
Sure, thank you. I worked for 30 years in disability management in the corporate world, and I worked in a leadership role, and worked with a lot of healthcare and dealing with individuals who were injured on the job and having issues like post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic mental stress and so forth. And then I retired from that and continued. I was coaching all along the time, and I continued my coaching practice, and I got exposed to positive intelligence. And I thought, this is what we're missing. This is what we need. Organizations need this. So I called up Positive Intelligence, had a conversation with them, and we agreed to have me join and help them build their B2B or business-to-business approach.
And is your background in HR or people and culture, or what is your background that had you in that disability space?
So I actually had a certification in disability management and a master's in organizational management. And it was just a strong interest because I wanted to give back to my community. And this helped all the people in Ontario. So I felt that I was doing something right. And then I really got a strong interest in working with people with mental health because I have family members who have experienced significant mental health issues. And then also seeing many of the clients we worked with who had mental health issues. And I thought, this is preventable in some circumstances, obviously not all, but in some. And what can I do to contribute to help people be more mentally fit so that when they have the challenges that you experience in life, some that could be extremely significant, you can manage it better, that you have more resilience, that you have more strength in order to manage it. And I think building on mental fitness really helps us manage all these stresses that happen in life.
Well, we are going to be talking about that today. But Debbie, what's your journey? What's brought you to this world of positive intelligence?
Thanks so much for asking. So yes, as I mentioned, I was with YPO for, well, prior to that, I did many other things, but my last sort of tenure was 17 years with YPO, which is an executive leadership organization.
YPO stands for
Young Presidents Organization.
Right.
And it's the leading global leadership organization in the world. And, but I also used to moonlight as a coach while I was at it. And, through my journey, obviously I got to work alongside amazing leaders and just watch them having impact and doing some really amazing stuff. But when I was doing my Clifton Strength Finder stuff, I also qualified as a Bulbin coach. And it was all about wanting to have impact and bringing change. And then I was gifted PQ by actually my brother-in-law's girlfriend. And I did this, and it was transformational for me. And I realized it was time for change. And I turned to my husband in December 3 years ago, and I said, I'm going to join Positive Intelligence. And he said, are you having a midlife crisis? Are you crazy? And I was like, I'm doing this. And so I slid the job finder on LinkedIn, and I had obviously done a lot of work within PQ. I had run pods, and I just saw the significant change that it brings, and it was sustainable. And what it was actually doing, it worked so beautifully with what I was doing with Clifton Strength Finder. So I saw how it kind of worked in tandem. And yeah, what can I say? Rhonda let me in the door, and before I knew where I was, 2 years later, here I am. And it's really about creating that change, being able to see organizations using this. It's one of the only programs in the world the only program in the world that addresses 17 of the 18 core EQ competencies, and hence why I love it.
Yes, gosh, that's so interesting. I mean, I want to talk about so much of what you've already said, but the whole corporate world has. I mean, I've said to people that this is probably the best time in history to be involved in, best and worst in many ways, the best time in history to be involved in workplace well-being, in HR, people and culture, because I truly believe this is where change is going to occur in the workplace. There's a confluence of interest, not a conflict of interest. But it's the worst time because mental health has never been supposedly worse. You know, I think the statistics speak for themselves. There's an international standard, I think, called the ISO 45003. I don't know whether you are familiar with it at all, but it talks about creating psychological safety in the workplace. And that's been legislated in Australia. It's now legislated that companies and managers are liable to minimize the psychological safety of their employees. What an amazing legislation.
Oh. That is fantastic. I think everywhere should have something like that, because one of the things that I find in the workplace, Ron, is that when that psychological safety doesn't exist, it now exhibits itself in an individual in ways that are negative, not just for their own well-being, but for the organization as well. So it's a huge commitment for an organization to make such that they will get a really huge outcome as well. Like it balances, right? The commitment that they make to create that psychological safety in order to ensure their people are more mentally fit.
Yeah. I know we did a program with a senior HR executive in one of the biggest international firms in Australia. His name was Mike Hagan, actually globally, Bosch in, the Bosch company. Mm-hmm. And he made the point that a company culture was an intersection of three things. One is the formal policies of a company. The other is the informal policies of a company, like, if you want something done, go and see Fred. And the third part of it was the individual in the company. And the way those three intersect is the corporate culture. And this is what I love about the potential of this, because it's about the individual and what goes on in their head. But here's the thing. One of the things that I love about positive intelligence, your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And who doesn't want to hang out with your best friend? And if that's going on in your own head, how can we change that to be more often with our best friend?
Rhonda?
I want to, Debbie, sure. I want to actually use Debbie's expression, and I may not get it 100% correct, so Debbie, correct me, but this is really good. It's about these negative thoughts that are having a picnic inside your mind, right? And you want to stop them. And the way you do that is, first of all, you need to be aware of it. You need to become self-aware. So one of the ways that we do that in positive intelligence is we have this amazing saboteur assessment that people can do free of charge if they go to the website. And when they do that assessment, they now become more self-aware of what are the lies their saboteurs are telling them. The next thing that you need to do is intercept them. So you need to say, no, I'm not listening to that lie. It's not true. And you now have to reset the brain. So you do what we call is a PQ rep. And what a PQ rep is, just a few seconds of doing something. I'll give you an example of one. You can take 2 fingers, and if you want to do it with me, rub them together gently with such a tension that you can feel the fingertip ridges. And I'd like you to really focus on how those fingertip ridges feel. And you literally do that for 10 seconds. And what you're doing is interrupting that negative thinking that's happening. And now you want to get into what we call a sage mindset, where you now use your sage powers and you come with the perspective that every problem has an opportunity or a gift. So can I give you a quick example?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I recently experienced a flood of my place in my condo. So 21 floors were flooded, and I'm on the 18th floor, and my condo was totally flooded. I could not live in it. I had to move out of it. I had to get it redone. And I could have said, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is the worst thing. Look what's happened. All my things are damaged, and really focus on the negative things. And I will tell you, initially I felt that way. But the thing about mental fitness is how quickly you can recover. And I was able to recover very quickly and recognize here is an opportunity for me to redo my whole place. I have always wanted a new kitchen. I'm going to have a new kitchen. I'm going to have new floors. And I got excited about the project of redoing my whole place, as opposed to focusing on, oh, woe is me, that my place is not great and this is happening and that. No, I'm focusing on the opportunity and the gift of having this happen to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, it does. And I mean, I guess playing the devil's advocate there, people would say, but, that's great because you've got insurance probably, and the insurance probably paid for that. It would be interesting to test your mental fitness if you weren't insured.
So yes, I agree with you there. And I think then what is the gift? You need to look at it. So what did you learn from this particular scenario? One, that insurance is important. So next time you will have, and you know what? Next time might be worse than this time. So maybe it's a good thing that this happened now so that the next time you are prepared. That's just one example. But there's a variety, and not always can you right away find the gift. Sometimes it takes some time, right? And you have to work it through. Like, how many times have you looked back on a situation that you didn't feel was good years ago, and now you realize actually that's a good thing that happened, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It's very
Did
much
you want
about
to add
trusting
anything?
the journey.
Trusting the journey, yeah. You've mentioned there, but the positive side of things. I mean, I love the saboteur assessment, and we will, of course, have links to all of the things, because the first thing is to establish where you are now. What is your positive intelligence quotient, isn't it? I mean, that's also something that is assessed.
Correct.
Yes.
And that is assessed on a scale of 0 to 100. So you fill out this very quick questionnaire. I mean, it's important to do it quite quickly because it wants to get a sense of your own frame of mind. And you then end up with this. So it's about 30 questions, I think, from memory. I've done it a few times. And you come up with a score out of 100. And that score can be quite confronting or reaffirming. But there's a tipping point, isn't there? I know in the program, it's a 6-week program. We'll have links to that as well. But I know in the program, Shazad, who is leading this who's innovated this whole move, and I'd love to get a bit of background on Shazad as well. But he makes the point that 75 is the tipping point. So that would be for every thought you have, 3 are positive and 1 might be negative. So there's 4 thoughts, 3/4 of them or 75% of them are positive, 1 or 25% of them are negative, but somehow that is a tipping point. Can you talk to that at all?
Debbie, do you want to chat now?
I'm happy to have a stab at this one. So, I often use the analogy of, and it's a very simple analogy, that if you had to have a negative engagement with me, you would need 3 positive engagements from me to counteract your negative. So let's say you're reprimanding your child or you having an altercation with a colleague. That 1 negative engagement is going to take 3 positive engagements to counteract that negative. So why would you not be operating from a sage stance? So the more you can embrace that ease and flow, the more you can reframe that thinking to go, what's a better way to navigate this? What's potentially the 10% I can use here? I was using this analogy with someone earlier on today to go, so is it all bad? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, there isn't even 10% in here. That she was, yeah, well, I could probably use 10% of that. I'm great. And I'm like, well, how do we leverage that? And so it's about how do we start framing things differently and changing the lens in the way that we move forward and start to navigate life. So when we start to use those sage powers like explore, activate, innovate, how are we starting to shift that in terms of that's tipping scale? Rhonda, how was that?
It was very good. Thanks.
You've mentioned one of the other things that I found really fascinating, and the analogy is that the positive part of our brain is one part of our brain in this right prefrontal cortex, and the negative part, which is the survival part, is at the back of our brain, and we can develop those neural pathways to be either a dirt track or a 5-lane highway. And I loved that analogy. It kind of really resonated with me. And that positive part of our brain, and you've mentioned the word sage a few times, I just want to unpack that a little bit because I know there are 5 sage powers. Let's talk about those.
I'm going to pick the first one that I love the most, right? And that sage power is explore. And I love that one because if you are in a conversation with somebody and you are not agreeing with what they're saying, or they're not agreeing with what you are saying, and you take an approach of getting curious and really trying to understand where they're coming from, as opposed to judging where they're coming from or to saying that they're wrong, they don't know what they're talking about, I'll just wait till I have to talk so I could convince them as to what the right thing is. So as opposed to, I wonder what I could learn from what they're saying. I wonder what I can apply from what they're saying to what my decision is. Can we potentially find a third decision out of all of this? And why am I having a negative reaction to what they're saying? What's triggering me on this? That changes the dynamics of the conversation right away. And you're going to have a better outcome. So that's just an example of explore. Debbie, I'll let you.
No, I love that. Yeah, let's go, because there are 5 of these, and I think they each deserve, highlighting, not just one word thing. What's the next sage power after explore?
Well, I'm going to go with empathy. It's one of my favorites. And I tend to use empathy as a mom and in my professional life. But there are times that, we do get hijacked. And it means I need to have a little bit of self-love for me and go, hey, I'm human. Or I'm sitting with someone and they are just not in a sage stance. I can see they're just, heightened up and ready to take me on. And I've got to go, what's sitting on the other end of this? How do I activate their sage? Why are they so rattled? And I have a huge amount of empathy for that individual to activate their sage, to get them to that point, because trying to take them head on I'm not going to achieve the outcome. So it's about having sage for others and having empathy for others, having empathy for myself, and just having that gift of acceptance sometimes to go, okay, we're not going to get where we need to be, but I can have great love. And it's powerful. It's powerful to have that. There's times that I'm a fabulous mom, and there's times that I'm a terrible mom. And it's just going, I'm actually getting to do this, but I get to show up as the best version of me. And it's having that beautiful self-love for yourself.
It's interesting because we have done programs on compassion. We've done it with the author of The Compassionate Mind, Professor Paul Gilbert, and he made the point that it really has to start with self-compassion. If you don't have compassion for yourself, it's very hard to empathize with anybody else. And that you've mentioned it. We've mentioned a couple of times, and I want to bring it back. This 10%. Like even if you disagree with someone vehemently, you have to approach it from the point of view that at least 10% of what they've said, there's something there. There's a little grain of truth to what is there, and to find that. And I love this exercise of the yes and exercise. Tell us. Let's just talk about that, because, we've talked about explore, and now we're open to exploring, and we are going to empathize, hopefully with ourselves and others. But then we can actually turn that into a wonderful game, which I've done a few times, and it's been quite remarkable. Share with us the yes and game.
Sure, I'll do that. That's the innovate sage power.
Innovate.
Yes.
Okay. See, I'm still early in this, but we're one ahead. Innovate.
That's okay.
But go on. The third one is innovate. So let's talk about innovate and then talk about the yes and. Sorry, I got that wrong.
That's fine. So with innovate, you start with a statement or an idea that you're working with. And then you start with, what I like about what you said is this. And you find that 10% that you can agree with and really focus on. So what that does is let that person know that you listened to them and you appreciated what they had to offer. So when somebody feels listened to, they become less defensive and more open to innovate in a conversation. And then, so what I like about what you said is this, and, not a but, and you add on to the idea and you build on it. And what you find, especially if you use this in the corporate world, in the team environments, is that you get such innovative solutions that you would not have gotten had you not had a discussion like this, because it really allows you to come up with all the different ideas that potentially could be to solve the problem that you're working on.
Yes, I love that. And I know when we've done that in a group setting, and I think it's important to add that the ideas that you can come up with you don't have to justify them. You don't have to try and work out how they might work or whether they would or wouldn't work. These are just your ideas. Let's just shoot the breeze and let it happen. Let the innovation happen.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. So we've got the sage with explore. We've got the sage with empathize. We've got the sage with innovate. There are 5 powers. Let's move on to the last 2.
Debbie, would you like to take navigate? You've done that, and you do
I'll take navigate. So what I love about navigate, and I always use this strong visual image of literally standing with a compass in your hand, and it's this intentional journey of like self-discovery. It's finding an adaptation of choices, and it's about contributing to a healthier way, a more fulfilling life. So you literally are doing that. You're being more self-aware of your surroundings and the choices that you're making. And so almost standing with that compass in your hand and going, how do I get to navigate differently? So you're steering the course of where you want to be. So you're choosing positive influences. You're choosing to quieten those saboteurs in your mind. You're choosing to make a journey that's going to provide contentment and balance. That's how I like to look at navigate.
No, it's a nice way of looking at it. Did you want to add to that at all, Rhonda? Or
No, she's got that one good.
She's got that one good. Okay, so we've got the 4. explore, empathize, innovate, navigate. There's one more.
Activate.
Yeah.
That's when you're being intentional. That's when you're going to be laser focused, calm, clear-headed, and take action. And this is where you allow yourself to move forward in a sage way, where you're in a positive mindset. And so you've cleared the decks and ready to move forward. And you have gone through all the steps you need to get there, to get you prepared and ready. Deb, do you want to add to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rhonda and I mean, I first started working at Positive Intelligence. I used to talk about the power of manifestation. So Rhonda still teases me. She'll go like, come on, Dave, I need you to manifest this for me. So, and that's one of the powers that I use in Activate is really, I go in and I'm like, I'm manifesting this. This is going to happen. This is intentional. And the reality is that's exactly what I did with Positive Intelligence. I manifested that I would work for Positive Intelligence within 3 months. And I did.
Yeah, no, I can understand the appeal. So here we are with the Sage. We've kind of laying down the roadwork for a 5-lane highway to the front of our brain to really use the Sage in everyday situations. But we've talked about the saboteurs, and as you mentioned, there is an assessment that gives you a personalised accomplice saboteurs, because we all have a common saboteur. Can we talk about the common saboteur?
Well, we all have the judge. It's judge of yourself, judge of others, and judge of circumstances. And so everybody has that. And then there's 9 accomplice saboteurs.
Yes. Well, the judge, is a very powerful one, isn't it? I mean, boy, when I got my accomplice saboteurs report, oh my God! I mean, it spoke to me perfectly. It was me there. I shouldn't have been surprised at how strong so many of those accomplice saboteurs were. But the judge really is a big one, isn't it? Always judging yourself, and this comes back to self-compassion as well. But judging others is so easy. And judging situations that we're in. And it's interesting because I have always said that while we may not have control, and this is before I even knew about positive intelligence, while we may not have control over events or people in our lives, we do have control about how we think about them. Cool. And that was really a powerful thought. And I thought, yes, that's a very good way of looking at it. But how should I think about it? And that's where this positive intelligence is. So this is the language and structure to take that concept a little bit further. And so I love the judge, but tell us about some of the other accomplices. I mean, my top accomplice was restless and hyper-vigilant and hyperachiever and, stickler. I mean, my background is dentistry, so being a stickler may not have been a bad thing. But they were my accomplices and they spoke to me very powerfully. And so when I had that noise going on in my head, I thought, okay, there is the judge. Calm down, Ron. You're being restless. Let the children run. They won't die. It's okay. Etc. So tell us a little bit about the other accomplice. I've mentioned a few, but let's dive into some of those accomplice saboteurs.
I just want to say one thing before we move forward, and I always say this when Rhonda and I are delivering workshops, is that your saboteurs do not define you. So you are not defined by your saboteur. So you don't say I am a hyperachiever, and I always say if you take away nothing from hearing this or engaging, it's so important. So they trip us up. They're there to kind of get in the way, and that's the beauty of what Sage does. So it gets to shift those. So I'm going to take this opportunity to say my top one is pleaser, and I see my pleaser getting in the way all the time. So I think that comes out of working in an organization like YPO, which is servant leadership. And, you're just constantly out there making things better and paving the way. And so my pleaser can't say no. She's always out there wanting to, kind of pave the way for everybody. So I'm always aware of my pleaser and how she shows up. But her accomplice is the controller, because whilst she's also, doing her thing, the controller's going, well, I want to mandate this outcome. I want to make sure everyone's going to just be absolute kumbaya, having a fabulous party and, just having the best time. And then my hyperachiever says, no, but we've got to get, because I was in eventing for 22 years as well. So it's like, this has got to be a stellar event. We want 10 out of 10. So then they all sort of coming to the party, pitching a tent, opening up Netflix and not shifting very easily. So that's what I loved about what PQ was bringing. It allowed me to be, as they sort of come into the room, I go, no, you don't get to check in. You don't get to stay. You unwelcome guests at my party. I get to check you out. So it's about having that beautiful self-awareness about how they're coming in, how they're causing disruption, and how I get to shift them.
Yes. Wow, Debbie, my wife's top saboteur was pleaser too, and I just knew it. I just knew it. But that's a good thing. I mean, well, it's neither a good or a bad thing. And I love that. It doesn't define you. It doesn't define you. But at least rather than all these strangers coming in and out of your head all the time, you can build a familiarity with these voices. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, go on. Let's talk some more about what about your saboteurs, Rhonda? What was some of the personal, if you don't mind talking about them, of course, but we'll talk about a person you know.
I'm going to talk about others only because my top ones are hyperachiever, controller, and pleaser, and Debbie's touched based on
those, right? Okay. Is that what you've got to do to work at Positive Intelligence? You've got to be those. Is that part of the interview process? I know we're only taking pleasers, controllers, and hyperachievers. No, go on.
Listen, Rhonda and I are like two peas in a pod, so probably
we're like twins. So let me tell you a bit about the hyperrational, because I have a child who's a hyperrational, so I think I can speak to it really well. The hyperrational is motivated by the need to know everything and understand everything to the nth degree. And they want to be self-sufficient, and they don't want to look foolish. And so what happens is their inner critic overthinks, and they get very logical, way too much logic. And so they drown out emotions and gut feelings. And what is important is we need to work towards getting a balance between logic and emotions, and not shutting out the logical thinking, but also not letting the feelings overtake. So it's, what is that balance for the hyperrational? So I find when I look at the hyperrational or somebody who has that saboteur, they have a really hard time getting in touch with their feelings and their gut, and they really need to work hard on that. Deb, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. I mean, I can really also talk to the stickler, because like Rhonda, I've got two girls, and my eldest is a stickler, but she also has ADD. And so what I see with her ADD and the stickler is they almost like counteract one another. So she's in content development, she's in social media, and she would have created a perfect piece. And I'm like, it's great, it can go. And she'll go, no, but you know what? I think I just need to add this, or it just needs another line, or the images, and her stickler just gets so in the way of her being able to kind of take it to where it needs to be. And as a result, it slows her down. And then it kind of gets her triggering all sorts of other saboteurs along the way. So then her avoider comes into play, because then her avoider is going, it's not good enough yet. And so she doesn't send it. And then her hyperachiever is going, yeah, it's not good enough. And so I see how these three kind of work in tandem with her, and then along with her ADD, and it just becomes messy. So the stickler is just like, it's got to be flawless. It just has to be absolutely perfect. And we've got this one image that we're using, and it's literally this individual cutting grass with a pair of scissors, with a ruler. And that's literally what it's like. It's got to be perfect, but it's not this bullseye approach to everything. And it's painstaking.
Another one is that I think people would relate to, perhaps, is victim.
I'm happy to take this one as well, because the victim is when it's I'm unable to have clarity about something. So I fall into this victim mode. And what's interesting is I don't score with the victim. So when I did my saboteurs, I had an absolute 0. I didn't score. So I'm going to talk to a personal experience that I had. But then I had something happen in my life, and for 3 days, I knew I was absolutely caught up in victim mode. And I had to phone my coach and go, I'm so sabotaged by my victim at the moment. But because it's not a familiar saboteur for me, I don't know how to navigate my way out of this. And I need your help. And it was just this poor me, and like feeling so incredibly sorry for myself, unable to see. And I'm a very positive individual. So always glasses, half full. And if not, I get a smaller glass, and my glass is always full. And it's always just, moonshine and roses all the time. And it was just, I was like, why can't I shift? What is wrong with me? And she was able to kind of really take me through navigating what my victim is, and really helping me understand the saboteur and why it had held me captive. And even though we see, oh, I don't have a victim, how it can come and be detrimental at times. So yeah, it's not to say if it scores lowly in your as one of your accomplices, that it can't come and cause havoc.
The one thing I would tell you, Debbie, is one of the things I've learned just recently, because I'm doing a PQ mastery program, is that when the victim shows up, showing empathy for yourself is really important to help work it through. Also, what we talked about is where we encounter somebody who that is their major saboteur. Showing empathy for them is helpful as well, right? Because you really need to recognize they're in pain, they're suffering, they're feeling terrible. And so how can you help them? And showing some empathy is always, to me, the first step. And then exploring why it is you're feeling that way. What is happening right now that is giving you those types of thoughts? And how can we address that? So just thinking about how you can match up the saboteur with what you can do with your sage powers to really get you out of that sort of feeling is important.
Yes.
Shazad always,
Go on,
talks about
Debbie.
labeling the emotion. So when you're in saboteur mode and you're feeling it, so like when I was in victim, what was the emotion? It wasn't that I was trying so hard to shift it, but actually just let the emotion come in, settle, label it, move, and keep going there until such time as I'd actually worked my way through it. Because at times you can work really hard to try and shift, and you actually just need to settle with the emotion first and acknowledge the emotion that you're feeling. Because with every saboteur, there's generally an emotion. So there'll be a stress and anxiety or something that's associated to that saboteur.
I mean, people would say, if they were listening to this, might say, well, isn't judging, isn't being a hyperachiever, isn't this why I'm as successful as I am? And this has worked so well for me. This is why I am where I am. What do we say to that?
Oh, we hear that often.
Well, let's respond. First, you, Rhonda.
Sure. So the first thing I would say is that how happy are you? You say these things have helped you. How happy are you feeling today? Has it helped you feel better as a person? If you can achieve all these things using your sage powers and being in that positive mindset, and you can actually potentially achieve more. But the most important thing is you'll be happier along the way. And what your saboteurs do is beat you up and make you feel terrible, either about yourself or about others or about the circumstance that you're in, and doesn't allow you to be as clear-headed and laser-focused in your thinking. So what we want is not to keep your hand on the hot stove all the time, because that's what you're doing when you're in saboteur mode. Your hand is on that hot stove. That hot stove is just for a split second to let you know something is wrong and need to deal with it. And then you need to get out of that saboteur mode and get into your sage mindset. And you're going to have a better outcome and you're going to be a happier person.
Debbie, did you want to add anything?
I mean, Rhonda has summed it up beautifully. And, I can say to you that I've been doing PQ for 3.5 years. And this year I'm celebrating 25 years of marriage. And my husband reckons he wishes he could have had a PQ wife 25 years ago. So I'm just going to leave it right there, because she does think very differently. And so the way that and again, your saboteurs serve you for that millisecond. And I do. There's far more ease and flow. It has served me both personally and professionally. So the best version of me is showing up. So I love me. I'm loving this version of me, the mom, the professional, and how she gets to have impact in the world. And that's what we're wanting to bring to organizations. So yes, I believe for many years that my hyperachiever has done me well and served me well. But I can tell you now that my sage has served me far better. And my husband will attest to that.
Yes, well, I don't want to get too much into a kumbaya moment here, but I could not agree more. And, my wife and I are just coming up for our 45th year of knowing each other. And I must say, never been happier. And I'm not saying that this isn't a small part of it either. But that was so interesting, Rhonda. You said, how happy are you? Because I'm also very interested in the world of well-being. This is a whole global movement of happiness and well-being. Let's put happiness for a moment. But the question that one could or should ask oneself regularly, and I like to quantify things, and it's actually been validated that quantifying things is not a bad thing to do, and that is asking yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you today with your life? How happy are you today with your life on a scale of 1 to 10? And, everyone will answer that question differently. And obviously, if you're a 9 or a 10, good on you, and that's something we all aspire to. And that's what I love about this. You mentioned also, and you got us through, and I love the fact that you did this, got us through these PQ reps. And I said we can either develop the pathway to the front as a 5-lane highway or a dirt track. But when the saboteur shows up, and that's an important first step, isn't it? Then this doing these PQ, positivity quotient reps, is like doing a push-up, is a really powerful tool to refocus you towards the sage. Let's talk about the theory or some of the things that one can do as a PQ rep, as a mental push-up.
Deb, this is your stuff.
Well, I'm actually going to use a colleague of mine who shared, she watched her son showing, I think it was at a cross-country race, and he's like 9 years old, and they were about to start a race. And she noticed the little girl standing next to him was rubbing her fingers together. And she said to him, "Did you show her how to do a PQ rep?" And he went, "Yeah, Mom, she was really nervous." And so we're seeing this as both my girls, like Rhonda's, struggle with mental health. And, they're going into exams. My daughter's in her final year of schooling, and she went, "Mom, I'd be dead in the water without PQ reps." So it's really just about calming that inner sense in you. So whether you're doing it visual with anchor, or whether it's touch. I'm a lover of touch, the touch sensation. So it is this beautiful way to stop and recenter. I'm going to use a personal story. And I used to shake incredibly badly. So I had a sublime tremor. And so when I couldn't thread a needle, and I used to take medication for it, and I obviously started PQ repping, I don't shake anymore. I don't take any medication for it. And my doctor he's like, "What weird wizardry is this?" So much so that my doctor actually now uses me with patients and using PQ program, because he's seen the power of it. He's seen the shift in me. He did secretly say to me, "Are you not using a medicinal drug?" I was like, "No, I'm not. Don't worry. This is all real." And I actually took him through a PQ rep. And so if I do feel anxiousness, or I am starting to feel that, I will stop and do a PQ rep. And really, I've become very centered in terms of what's happening in my body. I'm so self-aware. And so having lived a life where I was struggling with these terrible tremors and unable to really even hold a cup of coffee without spilling it everywhere, I don't have it any longer. And it's down to the art of PQ and my repping.
So one of the things I want to add is that with the PQ reps, it's using different senses. So some people, like Debbie and I, love the touch, but there are a variety of PQ reps you can do. So you can listen to the song furthest away and then listen to the song closest to you and really pay attention to it. You can do deep breaths in and out, or you don't have to even do deep breaths. It could be just focus on the temperature of your breath as it goes in and out, right? Then there's visual, looking at a picture and looking at the lines and the textures and really paying attention to all that that picture has to offer. Sometimes when I'm in a Zoom meeting and I feel like I need just like a 10-second rep and I'm not in the mood to do like a touch one, I'll pay attention to one of the people in the room, in the Zoom room, and pay attention to different things on their face that I didn't notice before. Or maybe their background that I didn't notice before, and really focus on that just for a few seconds. 10 seconds is all you need, and it helps reset. So I hope that gives you an idea of the different types of PQ reps that you can do.
Yes. Debbie, go on, please.
You also don't need to do the reps in the app. So it's simple things like washing your hands. We don't realize how we're actually doing PQ reps all the time. So I've become very self-aware about literally washing my hands or peeling something, or how I become very focused on what it is that I'm doing and sort of almost becoming mesmerized in terms of what I'm doing. So, and inculcating my PQ reps into that.
And again, this is what I love about it, because we've talked for so many years about mindfulness as being a very important tool. It's like change your, like I just said, you can change your attitude to things and events, but what do I do with that? And mindfulness is, we know it's good, but what am I doing? Well, I'm actually calming the saboteur. I've just engaged the saboteur and I'm just pressing the pause button while the traffic signal changes towards my sage. And this is what mindfulness does. And I can do it, as you said, Rhonda, using any one of my senses. And Debbie, I love that too, that you can even just be washing your hands because, whatever, brushing your teeth, washing your hands, getting dressed, doing something mindfully to then change the direction of thought. This is, again, what I love about the whole thing. Listen, I know that I was fortunate enough to do the 6-week program actually, let's just talk for a moment about the innovator of this, Shazad. Tell us a bit about Shazad.
So Shazad Shamin is the CEO and founder of Positive Intelligence. He wrote the New York Times best-selling book, Positive Intelligence. And he studied at Stanford and done incredible research that involved looking at things like cognitive behavioral psychology, positive psychology, performance science, and so forth, and bringing this all together in his Positive Intelligence book, and created this amazing 6-week program that allows you to shift your mental state so that you build your mental fitness over those periods of time, so that if you actually put your brain on an MRI machine, you'd actually see a change. Because what's happening is you are changing the way those automated responses that you have that many times are negative, and you're intercepting that and having it move into more positive thinking or positive mindset.
Yes, no, I having done that 6-week program, and we'll of course have links to that in our show notes as well. I think the whole platform and the whole concept, because you've also mentioned EQ, emotional intelligence, which is again a rather, it's often a term that's thrown around. And, you need to improve your EQ. What is EQ? Well, there are 20 or 25 different parameters that make up EQ, and I could never remember more than 2 or 3 or 4, and I'm not even sure what the relevance of them were to me at any one time. But that's what I love about this sage saboteur thing. There are 5 sage powers. There's the one judge, which is common to us all, and our accomplice saboteurs. So it's very personalized and gives a wonderful structure and language to that noise that's going on in our head. thank you so much for joining us today. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No,
I
that
think
was
we've had a
good.
great
Thank you for your
conversation.
time.
Yeah, look, I've enjoyed it too, and it's been a great reminder, not as no one needed it, I'm practicing all the time, but it's been great to touch base with somebody from the organisation and hear your own insights and personal experience. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Well, Unstressed Health has really focused on health and well-being for individuals and for the workplace. And essentially, we look at the cycle of our daily lives as three things that we go through each and every day. We face challenges, be they personal or professional. We call that life. How do we approach those challenges? What is our mindset? Is it growth and thrive, or is it survive and threat? And this is where the world of positive intelligence dovetails into the Unstressed Health mission. And then the next part of the cycle is how you recover each and every day. How you recover on a daily basis, or how you recover from any disease. And that essentially is the 5 stressor model and 5 pillar model that any regular listener of this podcast will be familiar with. The 5 stresses are it defines a stress as anything that compromises your immune system or promotes chronic inflammation. And so the idea is to identify and minimize as many stressors as possible. And we look at 5: emotional, environmental, postural, nutritional, and dental stress. The other side of the balancing beam is to build resilience by focusing on the 5 pillars of health: sleep, breathe, nourish, move, and think. And this balancing beam pivots on our genes, but you're not a victim to your genes. It's how they express themselves in the wonderful and empowering science of epigenetics. That's what counts. So approaching this with a high positive intelligence makes so much more of life possible, enjoyable, productive, and it impacts on every aspect of our lives. Now, if you're wanting more information, let's get onto the positive intelligence side, or you can join the Unstressed Health site and explore your PQ with us. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well.
This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.